Good morning, everyone. We are just going to give it another minute or so just to let everybody join, and then we will get started with our webinar this morning. Perfect. So it's just a minute past, so we will get started. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. The webinar will be recorded. Everybody is cameras off and on mute. If you do need assistance or have any questions during the webinar, please pop them in the box and one of the team will get to you to answer them. So we will start this morning with just a quick introduction. We'll briefly go through about us as a company and Sage Intacct. Kyle will then jump in and do the demo, and we will have a Q&A session and close off for the morning. So I'm Hannah Hart. I'm the account manager here at Envisage, and we are joined by Kyle Moore, who is our Sage Intacct specialist, who will take us through the demo shortly. So just a bit about us. We are an award-winning Sage partner. We're part of the Knowledge Group. We have offices in Newcastle, Belfast, and Dublin, and we've over 20 years experience in Sage solutions across a range of industries. Perfect. So about the Sage Intacct product. So Sage Intacct uses AI-driven automation to simplify finances and boost team productivity. It's flexible, scalable, delivering faster insights. This makes it ideal for organizations looking to modernize and run more efficiently. Sorry, I just need to move the screen out the way. So you'll see here on screen a brief overview of the planning and budgeting with Sage Intacct. So you can see that it automates plans and budgets. It delivers financial insights faster and easier. You can do it in multiple currencies. It cuts budget creation time, and it's a flexible plan, making decisions in real time. So I will now pass over to Kyle, who will jump in and show us the planning in action.
Okay, thanks very much for joining us this morning. I'm just going to share my screen here, so hopefully everybody can now see that screen on this system there.
We can there.
Good. So as Hannah has already said, my name is Kyle. I've been working with the Sage products for over the past 25 years. I've worked with many different types of organizations, ranging from non-for-profit charities, service and product-based sales companies, and project-driven companies as well. So today I want to be showing you the many benefits your company can get by implementing Sage Intacct in your business. Maybe some of you already have Intacct there, so we're going to see some of the features that can help us in the system. In this session, as Hannah's already said, we'll be focusing on our budget and planning features in Sage Intacct product. I'm going to try and show you how we can sort of eliminate some of the spreadsheet errors with intuitive cloud-based solutions, how we can collaborate seamlessly across departments for accurate and flexible budgeting, how we can create and compare multiple what-if scenarios to guide us in our decision-making within the business, which is all very important, and also to achieve better financial agility with rolling forecasts and automated updates and things like that. So forgive me if you've been on a previous webinar with ourselves, but I think it's vital for new attendees to give a brief overview of the main function of the Intacct system to help us understand how the key features work best with our budgeting and planning information. So we're going to have a quick look at that. So whether you're a CFO, financial officer, department head, or whatever role you're playing in the company, Sage Intacct can help give you more information that you require at a glance and help with your working day. So the very first screen that I'm showing you here is our screen on our Sage Intacct. So it's our role-based dashboard. So if we can all see a role-based dashboard here. On a role-based dashboard, you can see we have different roles of the business, and depending on what we log into, will give us different information to help us with the day-to-day running of our Sage Intacct. So I'm logged in as a financial controller, and what I get to see with my financial controller dashboard is along the top, I get to see these things called performance cards. So you can see that each of these performance cards is showing us headline information about my expenses, my revenue, my customers, cash on hand, and hours billed. So that's pulling information from my company slash companies, which we'll see in a moment, and it's bringing them into a key performance indicator to allow us to see those on the screen here very easily and effectively. We can also see that we're looking against our prior month, and we've got a wee green flag here to say that that's all well and good. We're up on our prior month. These performance cards, we can drill into the detail of the performance cards. So for instance, if I went to cash on hand, I can click on that, up opens another screen. I can drill right into my bank, my main bank account, and I can look at my transactions on my main bank account. We can drill right down into the postings made for those. Now, just to draw your attention to a couple of things here, which we'll look at in a second, you notice that the transaction includes things like departments, locations, customers, we've got classes and journals and everything else. So we'll see how those things, which are called dimensions, can be used within the system. It is also beneficial to know that there is what's called statistical journals that we can use within the Sage Intacct. So that's things like if we wanted to record volunteers or hours worked or projects created or buildings refurbished, depending on what is on your particular company needs. So I have hours billed here. So if I click into the hours billed and drill right down into the hours billed, we can see there's transactions coming up, and I can drill right into the transaction. And instead of having debits and credits, what we have is increases and decreases. So this month we have had 80 hours plus another 8 hours billed. So therefore we're 88 hours billed within that particular nominal transaction. And that is very beneficial to us because we can use that information to allow us to do calculations on the system. So we can see that. So remembering that these dashboards are all pulled from different informations as we are posting our daily transactions in the system. So we're not doing anything else. It's compiling those information over there. The other thing we can understand is that we're not running some sort of update cube in the background. This is all information that we get as we post the transactions through the system. Now, I did allude to these dimensions that were on the transactions, and I just want to show you a quick slide to explain that. I know some of you are from the Sage 200 side of the business, so you have maybe Sage 200 in the system or other products that you're using at the moment. So it's important to see how Intacct uses these things called dimensions. So you can see that we have a core structure. So this is our general ledger or nominal ledger. These are our codes or chart of accounts that we have in the center of all of our processing. Around this, we have our dimensions used in Sage Intacct. So for instance, organizational dimensions are things like entities, companies, locations within companies, departments that we have. We can have classes, and this is a generic one that we can use for things like areas of the business, where, for instance, in Envisage, we have our NetSuite side, we have our Intacct side of the business, so we can split up our different sides and report on those from the system. If we have some of the extra modules enabled, we can have projects here as a dimension. And again, back to the business partner section, we can have customers, suppliers, employees, and even room to grow. We can create our own user-defined dimensions on the system. So how does that all work? How can we see that in the system? Well, we can use these dimensions in a number of different ways to give us information on the system. So as well as having our performance cards, we can have on our dashboard reports, we can have graphs, we can have close-through summaries, working checklists that we can use on the system. And we can see that we have a profit and loss revenue and detailed here. Again, we're talking about budgets today. So you can see that in my revenue, I have my actuals and I have my budget here. We're using a current year budget. And we can see that there's a difference between our budget and our actual, and that's being highlighted when it's getting close to the budget. For us, it would highlight in red. So if I scroll down here, you can see it's in red here, it means we're over the budget. So it's very easy to see from our financial reports and for our information here, how we can analyze budgets against reports. Now, working then with dimensions on the system, if we have the correct privileges, what we can do is we can actually go in and edit reports on the fly, go into my columns very easily, look at my actual column and say, well, this would be lovely if I could see the report and expand it by the like of my locations that I have in the system. So I set, save and done, refresh the report, and we now should have location 1, 2, all our locations added together, and we have our budgets against those locations as well. So you can see within the system, the Intacct system, we can add budgets to reports. We can throw the reports into different dimensions to give us more analysis where we need it. Even our performance cards, we can edit. And if I was to look at the editing here, I can go down and say, well, I'm not going to compare it to the period last year. I wanted to compare it to a budget. And we can make the budget red flagged if it's over, save that, refresh our list, and we now have the ability to see our revenue is under budget at the moment by 13.96%. Okay, so we have all of the information getting on our performance cards and on our dashboards, and we can change our dashboards depending on what our role is. Okay, at this point, I think it would be good to look at how Intacct can help a business that has multiple companies. A lot of companies nowadays have different companies in different currencies, for instance, different locations around the world. We're becoming a very global society. And the way Sage Intacct works with this is it can work in 2 different ways. So the first way is this, and the most common way is called a multi-entity shared company setup. So if you notice that from the top level here, I can drop down and I've got different locations on the system. And these locations can share information. Now that's important when we're coming to budgets and we're coming to look at dimensions as well. So the fact that we can share, for instance, our chart of accounts, so all our general ledger structure can be set up at this top level, and each of the companies below that will have the ability to use that chart of accounts, which means that our Sage Intacct product can have a standardized set of accounts the whole way through the system. Now, there is exceptions to that, and we can do that as well. But if I give you a quick look at just my company setup, through my consolidation here and my organizational view, you can see that I've got my software company and I've got my locations, and they're using different currencies and even using different tax and VAT information on the system. So that's through my consolidation. Back to my dashboard here, and I can see that if I'm in my dashboard, all of the information is rolled up at the moment. I can use my departments to say, just show me the sales department here, and apply that filter. That filter then changes all of the information, including my budgets, okay, including my budgets, which again, we'll see in a moment. Again, if I just go back and say no departments and apply, that brings me back. So there's an awful lot of information that you can see just by inquiring and cutting down the information as we go along. The other thing is, if I wanted to change into a particular company, I can go in and say, well, show me what my Canada company is like at the moment. Again, opens a new tab for me. What will happen is that it will load the information on the page that I was on, which was the financial controller. And you can see if I flick back and forward, figures are changing because I have now went into the Canadian company, and I can see that there are different information, different budgets if I had them against them. Okay, so that is giving you a wee brief overview of the company setup, the dimension setup, the dashboard setup. Now, how do we start to use our budgets in the system? Well, one of the main reasons for using budgets, or sorry, not main reasons, but the main way we can see it is through our reports. Okay, we don't have to export things out the Excel, create reports in Excel with budgets on them. We can create the budget reports directly from the system. So if I go now to my dashboard and go to my picker here, into my reports, I have my financial reports on the system. So I'm looking at my financial reports, and I can see there from my list, we have a number of standard financial reports that I have in the system. There is, in fact, a number of reports that come as standard when you buy the Sage Intacct system. But I'm going to look at this one that says profit and loss, actual versus budget. Now, pointing out a few things here, we can set the reports to be a particular report type or a particular report audience. And we can also output this report to many different ways. So if I did the HTML, it sends it to screen. So I've got criteria that I can use on the system, but if I click OK, you can see here that on the screen, I've got my profit and loss budget and actual. If I click down into the revenue, subscription, services, it can drop down and show me the different GL codes within those categories or subgroups. You'll notice that I have this particular report in the locations. And as well, I have two different budgets on this report. So I have a proposed budget and I have an operating budget on here, and I can see the differences in both financial and also variations on my system report here. So budgets in the system can be shown on financial reports very easily for us, and we can look at how we are going to input our budgets in a second. But we can do that all through the reports here, and I can print it, send it to Excel, and I can email that report out to whoever I want to send that to. Now, as well as sending it to screen, I can send it to CSV, PDF, Excel on the system, or indeed I can schedule reports. So one of the things for maybe a month-end management meeting, I want to schedule the budget report to be sent out as part of my report pack. I can do that, and I can do it from a particular date. A nice one here is I can send it after the general ledger's closed. So again, I don't want to be sending out too much information until I have finalized my GL report for the month. I can do that on the close, and I can email it or store it as well. The other things from your reports is if we go to run this as an HTML again, we have the ability to, on the screen, not only expand sections, but we have the ability to drill down into transactions on the system. So we can drill down into the general ledger report. We can go and see the transaction that is involved in that particular total. And that brings us right down to the invoice, where we can see how that invoice, there's my general ledger account, there is my locations, departments, and classes, etc. on that. So again, all bits of information that are very useful when it comes to our planning, our budgeting, all in the one place under reports. Now, it's worthwhile to say as well that we have budgets against not just our GL code here, but if I was, for instance, doing actuals versus budgets on things like projects, I can key in my projects there. So if I just type in Z projects, there, up comes my projects, and I can see that I've got projects versus budgets here, and I can run that report. So I've now got a list of my billable projects on the system, my actuals for labor costs, budget against that, and against my expenses, and against my costs. So when we're talking about budgets, we can concentrate on GL budgets, but we can also see budgets against other dimensions such as projects or locations or departments or even employees or customers on the system. So when it comes to the month end, we can schedule reports, we can see them, we can look at the standard reports. In fact, we can actually look at reports there that are for a bit more interactive. So there's an extended report designer in here called Visual Explorer, and I just looked at my GL budgets actuals versus my budget. I can calculate that figures, and I've got now extended graphs where I have my workbooks or storybooks just down below, my overviews, and what I can do is I can set different locations and have different criteria against my reports, just as it's loading there. Okay, so we can be quite extensive in our reports and get a lot of information out of the system. Okay, now how do we get the budgets into the system? I hear you asking. And Sage Intacct comes with a budgeting module. So when we go into our budgeting module, we can go to budgets and budget repositories. So the first issue that we can see straight away is that we have multiple budgets on our system. So we can see multiple budgets. We're not restricted to one budget per GL. So anybody that's on the call from Sage 200, you will know yourself that you have a budget against the nominal ledger and we can only have an original budget and a revised budget. I'm sure that this part of the year you have already looked at your budgets for next year. And what you might do is you might have a forecasted budget. So here's what we think we're going to do. But that forecasted budget then can change into your current year's budget, or again, a master budget or an operating budget on the system. If you remember back to the P&L I showed you, we had our operating budget and we had our forecasted budget on there as well. So how do we do that? So we can see, for instance, that we have multiple budgets on the system. That's great. The second issue that we can address, if I just go into my operating budget and go to my budget details here, is that you can see this GL code for revenue services. Okay, the 40-100. And you can scroll down and see other GL codes as well being budgeted against it. You'll notice that across the top here, we have our dimensions. So if I look at this one and go to the budgets in here, I am budgeting against a location and I'm budgeting against a period. Now, again, on your budgets, you can have monthly budgets, quarterly budgets, yearly budgets on the system, but most of the time we're looking at our monthly budgets. And again, we can increase our budget by percentages from last year and things like that. Now, looking at the top budget then, we're not only looking at the GL, we're not only looking at the department sales and the location, but I've also budgeted against a class and a customer. So again, if I went into my budget information here and view that budget information, you can see along the top, we've got our account, our department, our customer, our service line 1, and our location as well. So we can make our budgets within Sage Intacct as detailed or as summary version as we need in our business. You have all different businesses out there, and there's all different ways that you can have your budgets in the system. You may need more detail on customer budgets. Some people need more detail on project budgets and everything else. Now, how easy is it, to actually get the budgets in there? Very easy. We can just import budgets in the system and we can choose a file format. We can even download templates that will be already there for us to see the budgets, and they can be brought in. I'll give you an example just of a budget that we have on the system. So here's a very simple budget file that we can bring in. And again, we're choosing our budget ID. That's our budget name. We've got our GL codes, our departments, our locations, and any other dimension that we want. We have our budget information, our values, and we can even have budget notes for those particular ideas as well. So let's see how we can do that. We can use our budgets. And again, looking back just on our system, we can export budgets out, we can change them, we can bring them back in again. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of the flexibility of importing, exporting budgets, and actually setting up multiple budgets on the system. Those multiple budgets, if I just went back to my dashboard again, role-based dashboard in the financial controller, then we can see here that if I was to change my report again, go to my columns, there's my budget column, and I can just say straight away, I want to change that from my current year's budget to my operating budget. Save and done. Refresh the list. And that budget figures have now changed my operating budget I'm looking at now. So it is very easy to be able to change those budgets, jump them in and out, depending on what you want to see. Now, I find that when I'm dealing with companies there, some of them are looking at month ends or period end routine as an indicator of how close they are to the budget, whether they're over budget or under budget, and where we want to be according to the month end reports. And at that stage, they discover their budget overruns and have to try and bring that back in the next financial period. With Sage Intacct, we can address this by looking at our budgets as we are going through the system, as we're posting transactions. And there's a thing called Spend Insight that we can enable within Sage Intacct, and that directly relates to our budgeting figures against our GLs, our dimensions as well. So they can be, the Spend Insight can be set up against particular journals that we have on the system, AP invoices in the system, and even purchase orders. So we'll show you just how that particular spend management works. So if I just go through, I can see a payroll journal here with spend management on it. Opens up my journal here. So what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to give a bonus to my staff. So I come down and I put in the transaction in the system. So I'm going to be using 14,000 here. And you can see there's a Show Spend Insight button. If I click the Show Spend Insight button, what will happen is it will bring me up the Spend Insight on the location, the department, and the GL code that I'm using. And it's showing me that my budget was 12,000, my actual is 13,000. So therefore, my funds available for my bonus is actually less here. So I have minus 15,000. So really, if I post this transaction, I will be over budget, and I can tell at the stage of posting the transaction. So that gives us insight as we are processing our transactions in the system. Again, one of the other big issues we have with businesses is that purchase orders come in. So we need purchase orders on the system. I'm trying to create an order here, and the order is for professional fees expenses. I've put it into a particular location, department. Again, it's a purchase order. I have spend insight information on that purchase order, and I can see that my budget is this, my actual is this, so therefore I do have funds available to be able to put that purchase order in. So depending on who's putting the purchase order in and what you want to allow them to see, they can see whether they need to go to somebody and increase a budget, or indeed not order that until next period, next month. So that's your nominal budgets, spend management, and that's your purchase order spend management on the system. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an understanding how Sage Intacct can help when you're processing the information on the C. You can see insight that's useful for your company, not only and reports at the end of days, weeks, months, but also as you're keying transactions into the system. So we can see that's how it's very useful. If you want to go beyond those reports that we've seen already and going beyond the spend insight into something like what's scenario-based modeling, what if questions, then we do have the ability to bring all our information into a product called Sage Intacct Planning. Okay, so Sage Intacct Planning allows us to bring our budgets in. It allows us to then use those budgets to manipulate figures, to add in what if scenarios, etc. Using there's built-in templates here that we can use to help lead us to a more effective and efficient budgeting planning. We can create unlimited scenarios in the system and models to see how, what is the potential impact in your business if we bring on another sales rep, if we increase our sales by a particular percentage, if our profit margin drops. And also, it uses our dimensions in here as well, and we can collaborate with our team on the system. So let's take a wee quick look at that. At the moment, I've got a budget set up. We've got new budgets. We can create a new budget on the system. I'm just looking at this SPC budget. I'm looking at my budget model, and you can see that I have my budgets split up into different sections, sales and travel. So if I look at my sales here, I can see that I've got my standard product model and I've got my premium product model. If I look at my standard products, I can see I'm making a few assumptions on the system. So I'm saying with my standard products here, my main product line, I'm getting a value here of 725 for that product. And actually, there's a list price here for the second item, so product one, product two, of 850. Okay, now how does that help us? All right. Well, if we look at our model line here, we have our inputs, our units, and we have our sales. So I can go in and edit my input here. And what I've assumed here is on a model type growth month to month, again, I can have different model types in here depending on your scenario. I am saying that we are wanting to see a 5% growth month on month. Okay. And I'm taking 100% of the sales value of those quantities sold. So close that. I'll save this for now. And I can see there that I've got my 100 sales sold January, 105. So it's increasing by my 5% for the units sold. On my sales value then, what it's doing is it's taking the value that I've keyed in above, multiplying it by the units sold to give me my sales price. So again, going into that, and I have now a formula that I can use, which is my list price times my units sold. So we can do calculations on the system and use the system to generate that information for us on the standard lines. That's within our model. Okay, again, within our model, we can have different scenarios in the system. So we can have a list price increase scenario. So when I go into that, I can see what we'll do if I have a list price scenario, best, worst case. And again, we can create as many scenarios as we want on the system. We even have the ability to have scenarios or models based on a library. So I'm going in here, I could say that, okay, I'm looking at all, and I could say that, there you go, there's a travel module here, the model, sorry, that I can have. So I can add that travel model to the system from a selected template. And again, if I look at my travel now, I can see that, well, we're planning 5 people to go out in January, another trip in May, giving us our total here. If I scrolled along, I would see more for the year. Again, we can look at the inputs for that. Key in the values of the trips, specify the various amounts, where it's coming from, and we can then look at the value for that as well. And we're looking at the value against our average cost and our trips on the system. Okay, so how does that help us when we're coming to looking at our budgets and looking at our item lines? Well, if we go now to our main items, we can see that there we have our budget information on the system. In fact, if I go to sheets, I can see now, excuse me, our different variations across the top here. So I can look at my cash, I can look at my profit and loss, my balance sheet, any bookings that I have on the system, what my head count is, what model I'm using. So if I went to my profit and loss, just to give you an idea there, I can see that I have my revenue in the system. I can see that I have my different sections. I can see my different products and how that looks. Now, at the moment, I'm looking at a scenario. I'm looking at my working budget, for instance, here. I can see my budget only, or I can see my rolling budget on the system. So the information is changing as I'm selecting from my budgeting and planning. And I can look at my budget versus actuals. So we can see here that these are our budget lines. We can see what the budget effect is going to be. If I was to change my budget scenario here and say, well, actually, I'm looking at a particular scenario in the business, and I'm looking at the best case scenario, best case only, or against our working budget, so I can see the difference to my scenario and my working budget. If I was to look at my best case scenario, then you can see what happens to the change for that. A list price increase again, I can see that against my increase in my working budget on the system. So that's my scenarios and my forecasts in the system, and also my working budgets. We can look at my budget figures. We can look at budget versus actuals. And then I've got all of the different dimensions that I can basically allow me to drill into the detail of that. So if I was to look now at my monthly budget, I can split it into quarterly. I can split it into yearly budgets on the system. What I can also do is I can create reports from this. So create reports, Excel, current view, create. Open that budget just to show you what it looks like, that report. And I should have Let me just do that again, sorry. Create, open, and there's my budget open. So I'm seeing in Excel now what I have on the screen and that I can show that to. Just coming back to one thing that I did mention, when I'm going into my inputs and looking at my inputs, I can also go in and share this information. So as the financial controller, I may not be the best person in the business to forecast the sales of products within the system. That's maybe more up to my sales manager. So what I can do is I can share that out, and I can share whether people can view it only. So they've got information on the budgets there, or whether they can actually modify. And I can just type the email of the person I want to share it with and invite them to contribute to the budgets. So sales manager could come in and he could say, okay, well, actually, when we're looking at our model here, when we're looking at our standard products, we're really talking about maybe in our main table here, um, we've got different values. So they can come in and actually say, well, in our model here, we're not going to be getting a 5% growth. I expect it to be more than 5%. I expect it to be at least 10% growth each month, and we can save the changes. So we can collaborate with other department members and also other people in the business. Just close that down. That now changes to our budget. We can go back to our sheets. We can look how that change affects us with our budget versus actuals. We can see here in Premier product, we have an issue. So we'll have to go back and try and change that. So constantly looking at our budgets versus our actuals in our different scenarios, allowing us to get the best information to clear out and not use our spreadsheets. We're seeing it all in here. And again, we can go in and look at that as not only monthlies, as different currencies, as different departments, as different locations. So all of that information is coming from the budgets within Sage Intacct. We're bringing them into our Intacct planning, Sage Intacct planning, and we're using those budgets in scenarios, what ifs. Again, if I just go down to my operating expenses, my cost of sales, we can see all of that. Other income and expenses, we can see through in the different departments and different locations. So I hope that's given you a bit of an understanding of how the Sage Intacct planning can help in those different scenarios. And we can look ahead and plan ahead and see what would happen, what if, and work that into our budgets and our planning. We also in the system have a dashboards. So a wee bit like Sage Intacct, we've seen the dashboards there. We can have dashboards on our budget system, so we can see it by all locations. We can drill down into departments. We can see, for instance, here our revenue, our balance, or our cash. We can go down into our budget highlights. And as I change information along the top here, so I said we're looking at our price list increase, but now we're looking at our worst case scenario. The information has now changed on the system for our worst case scenario. So that is a quick overview of our Sage Intacct planning as well as the budgeting within our Sage Intacct. I hope that has given you a high level overview of the system, how we can use that in our budgeting, for our reporting, for our on-screen viewing, for changing that way, and allowing us to be able to go in and modify as we need to going along. So I'm just going to pass it back to Hannah now
Thank you, Kyle.
for sum up. Thank you very much.
No problem. I will just share for the last couple of slides here just to finish up the morning. Thank you, Kyle. That was a very good demo. Very informative. Sorry. Oh, just go back a slide there. So just to sum up what Kyle has covered, so it was the budgets, forecasts, and actuals live. You can see there's a significant reduction in budgeting and forecasting time through Intacct. There's better collaboration, so you can involve multiple users, departments, locations, so it's not just the core finance team doing all the work. And you can reduce the risk of spreadsheet error through manual data entry. Perfect. So we will just pop into the Q&A session. There was a few questions coming in there. I will have to stop sharing my screen for the Q&A session. So just to touch on this before we finish up, so everyone will get sent the full recording of this session. And there will also be a link to book in a free 30-minute consultation if you'd like to have a further conversation with Kyle or one of the team on intact planning and how it can work for you. So my email is hannahhurt@envisagecloud.ie. I'm sure most of you have it by now. So if you do need anything or have any questions after this, please feel free to reach out and we will assist you. So I'll just stop sharing there for 2 seconds so I can jump into the question box here. So some of the questions that have come in, we'll start now with them is, can I build budgets by department, location, or entity?
And the answer to that is definitely yes. So just going back to my screen, I'll share my screen again,
Perfect.
where we talked about our dimensions. So if we said a location was a dimension, a department was a dimension, we can go back to our budgeting, budget repository, look at our budget details. And again, here's where we've got our different classes, customers, locations, departments. So all of that can be analyzed in our budget, and we can edit that budget and see that here is our departments, customers, locations. So any of the dimensions that you set up can be analyzed in your budgets. So yes, absolutely.
Perfect. That's brilliant. We have another one here as well. So say, can Sage Intacct handle multiple budget versions, e.g., if you have an approved budget versus a draft budget?
Yeah, so that again is a good question, and again we have our budget repository here, and we can see there's our operating budgets, our master budgets. If I just draw your attention back to when we looked at my reports and we looked at my financial information here, in the financial information, in the financial reports, we'll look at our budgeting, actuals versus budgets. Look at it on the screen here and run that report. So in this report, you can see we've got our different locations, but we've also our proposed budget. So we just drill into that a wee bit more. So you can see here's our proposed budget and our operating budget. So it's very easy to see not only what our actual values are, so our actuals, but it's
Yeah.
easy to see what we proposed. Maybe now you're starting to propose all your budgets. You might have actually probably had that wrapped up by now. But then as the year goes on, our proposed budget gets changed because of different factors throughout the year. So we can just see what the difference is between what we have proposed, how that's eating away to our actuals in the system, and what percentage that is against that. We can add multiple lines here, whatever budgets we want.
Perfect. That's
Okay.
brilliant. Thank you. Another one here is how do I configure budget periods, e.g., to have monthly, quarterly, or annually budgets?
Okay. So again, that's actually when we're setting our budgets up. So if I went into my budget information and I was to create a new budget on the system, there's budget information and we can set up default budget groups, etc. As part of the budget setup itself, in the configuration, there's spend management we can configure, but there's also then information around that. So we would need to go into our budgets. We would need to create our budget, our new budget. So I'm just going to put one in here for test. That might be a question we could go through offline, but if I just put a test budget in here, we can create our new budget. We can say what it's from. Okay, if we want to, and we can save that. Once we hit save budget here, we can start adding our budget information in, and this is where we can see periods on the system. We can specify a start period date and an end period date, set up our months, start period, end period, and set up our quarterly or yearly budgets as well in
Yeah.
here. So it's all about creating the periods as we are creating our budgets as well to give us what we want. A wee quick tip on this one is you have to set up the most detailed budget and then you go from the monthly to the quarterly to the yearly. If you set up just yearly budgets, you'll not be able to see your period budgets. If you set up quarterly budgets only, you'll not be able to see your period budgets. You have to set them all up as you're going along.
Okay, perfect. It seems very user-friendly as well and straightforward. Um, Perfect. I can't see any more questions there. Let me just double check. No, I can't see anything for now, but if anyone does have any questions, like I said, please feel free to reach out and we will get your questions answered and come back to you. And obviously if you want to book in the call, just let us know and we can arrange that as well. So I will leave it there then. Thank you very much, Kyle, for the demo, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I hope everyone has a lovely day.
Thanks very much. Cheerio.
Bye, everyone.